for a few. They must become an accessible choice for everyone, so to ensure that everybody can experience the benefits to count on a different energy solution. Because it is fair, because it also needs to be an easy and affordable choice. This is why we need to shield the most vulnerable. This crisis will have significant social consequences, but we think that we need to address the challenges acting together, working together. This marks the moment to accelerate, to deploy at the scale, to invest massively in solutions that can be deployed at home, because they will bring us the energy sovereignty we are looking for. Today's crisis shows to what extent speeding up our energy transition is key for competitiveness, resilience and prosperity. And we are in a better situation than in the previous energy crisis. We have done a lot, but we still need to do more, to accelerate, as it is said in this communication, but also to shield, to develop a shield for those that could be suffering the most in the current crisis. It triggers to double down our action. This is why we call it Accelerate EU. So, to ensure that this communication is part of our ongoing response, we stand ready to take further action if the situation could worsen. We don't know how long it could last. We know that we want to respond since the very first moment. 5 sets of actions to be undertaken both at the European level and at the Member State level. Thinking on coordination to deploy emergency measures. Thinking on the set of actions that intend to protect consumers and industry from price shocks. In this regard, we are concluding our works on a state aid temporary framework while keeping the possibility to deploy targeted and temporary measures to support those most affected by this crisis. The President von der Leyen, Commissioner Jørgensen have been sharing with their colleagues, and we will be discussing the framework that we think the most adequate in the coming weeks, in the coming days, building on our experience to better address the challenges faced by consumers by encouraging energy savings, accelerating the shift away from fossil fuels, and including proposals to protect consumers from disconnections, to develop social listening schemes, to ensure that social fairness of costs through taxation is also taken into consideration. There is a third set of actions aiming to accelerate the shift to homegrown clean energy. We have been working, led by Commissioner Jørgensen, on electrification to facilitate the lower of the electricity to fossil fuels price ratio, to develop some of the solutions that are already within reach. The fourth set of actions is stepping up our energy system by accelerating the efforts on grids and favouring electricity through taxation. And finally, we are convinced that it is important to keep on attracting investments, to accelerate our investments, to invest in the energy transition as the best decision that we Europeans can make, not only for climate, environmental or social reasons, also thinking on our security, on our competitiveness and the need to count on long-lasting prosperity for all. I'm sure that you will be pleased by the introductory comments that Commissioner Jørgensen will be making immediately after. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, EGP. And yes, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Jørgensen.
So, since the beginning of the conflict in the Middle East, our fossil fuel import bill has increased by over 24 billion euros. That's more than 500 million euros per day. These costs are being felt here and now in homes and businesses across Europe. But the true impact of this crisis is long-term. It is evolving. It is unpredictable. And here it is important to be clear with our citizens. The coming months will be filled with uncertainties. The crisis will hit different member states in different ways. As we cannot predict everything, we must be prepared for anything. But in the face of these uncertainties, there are things that we can be certain about. We can protect the most vulnerable citizens in our communities. We can protect the most exposed sectors of our economies, such as energy-intensive industries. And crucially, we can take action that will protect us from future shocks. We need to act fast, and we need to work together. Because shared European action can protect us from the worst impacts of this crisis. We will therefore work with Member States to refill our gas stocks in time for next winter without adding unnecessary pressure on markets. And we will step up action to ensure that the supply of fuels, including for planes, are adequate across the whole Union. I know this is a concern for many, given the approach of summer. We will coordinate more and better to secure supplies. We will seek to maximize existing refining capacity in Europe and look into our rules on strategic and emergency stocks to see if more can be done. When it comes to protecting consumers from price peaks, Member States have been given the tools that they need, and the EU's role is to support, coordinate, and accelerate, so that our actions can have as much impact as possible. We present Member States with the best practices and the most effective solutions to protect the citizens and the sectors that are most exposed. Energy vouchers for low-income households, financial support for energy-saving products, national campaigns to promote energy efficiency. Practical steps like these that can truly make a difference. We must focus on action that delivers double value by providing short-term benefits while also helping citizens and industry to capture the long-term savings of clean energy. For example, Austria. They are helping their vulnerable citizens to replace fossil fuel boilers. Belgium and Germany are offering reduced VAT and lower electricity prices respectively to boost the installation of heat pumps. France will relaunch its social leasing program for electric vehicles. This enables modest income households to lease a new EV at affordable rates. These are all examples of why we shouldn't simply burn taxpayers' money on fossil fuel subsidies. We should use it to build up and invest in modern technologies that add value for European consumers and manufacturers year after year. We will help Member States to multiply solutions like these, as well as to improve energy efficiency and replace oil and gas with alternatives like geothermal, solar thermal, and advanced sustainable biofuels. This must be a wake-up call and a turning point. When Europe steps away from fossil fuel dependence and steps toward clean energy autonomy, because now it is more obvious than ever. Clean energy means security. It means affordability. It means independence. This is why today we propose an acceleration towards electrification. Now is the time to push fossil fuels out of electricity production. Now is the time to electrify industry, transport, heating systems and buildings across Europe. As Europe, we must combine our efforts to roll out renewables and clean energy projects. We must reinforce our infrastructure with more connections, more storage capacity and more flexibility. Crucially, we must drive more investments in clean transition. That means unlocking every source of funding, EU, national and private. To Member States, I say, there are resources available. Where it makes sense for you and where you see the opportunity, you can redirect these resources towards high-impact energy projects that deliver rapid real-world benefits for your people. And we are here to help you with that. But we must go further. We will convene a Clean Energy Investment Summit, bringing together financiers, developers, and public institutions to turn ambition into action. Our goal? To mobilize the private investment that we so urgently need for immediate, game-changing solutions. By investing in clean energy and electrification, we unlock more money for our economy. In 2024, we spent 375 billion euros on the imports of fossil fuels. In the future, instead of buying something and burning it to get energy and then buying it again, we need to produce our own homegrown clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both. And let me remind you, as always on a college day, we have the pleasure and privilege of having all our team of interpreters ready to translate into all EU official languages, so do not hesitate to make use of it. And let's start with your questions. Fabio in the very back.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the floor. This is Fabio Napoli for the Italian news agency Public Policy. Here seems to be that the long-term objective is still the decarbonization. But at the same time, a lot of member states are asking to weaken the ETS system. So my question is, how can you ensure that all the change that you are going to make on the ETS won't go against the decarbonization objectives? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I may start, and maybe Commissioner Jørgensen wants to continue. I think that what we have been experiencing along the years, and very much in particular in these very recent years, is that the best measure to ensure competitiveness in the case of our industrial sectors, to reduce vulnerabilities, weakness, dependencies from abroad, is to think on how we can make a wise use of energy sources that do not need to be imported. It is very difficult to think that we can be competitive if we rely on something that we do not produce. It is very difficult to think that we can be safe, secure, if we depend on something that we do not produce. And I think that the long-term signals being deployed alongside the climate policies, including the emission trade scheme, the cost of emitting CO2, has been one of the most successful drivers in terms of transformation of the energy systems and in terms of modernization, to the extent possible, many of our industrial sites. So we should not derail these long-term signals. And of course, we can learn from 20 years of experience. There may be companies, not even sectors, companies that have dedicated much of what they have got in terms of free allowance to reinvest in the opportunity to modernize their sites. There may be companies that have found ways to promote technology breakthroughs, and there may be sectors that have experienced the limits of the speed in these technology breakthroughs and improvements. And I think that we will count on this very important occasion when asking ourselves what we have achieved, how we can improve the next chapters in our emissions trade scheme development. But what it cannot be said is that keeping our economy capture by a system that creates lots of additional costs and harms and does not help into this efficient, forward-looking and long-lasting competitiveness is a good recipe in any case. There was an interesting discussion at the EU leaders, a month ago. And I think that it was clear that the way forward, even with the opportunity to assess, to discuss, to enter into the details on how things have been working, but looking towards the future on how we can keep on doing our efforts without deviating from our long-term targets is broadly supported by the leaders and broadly supported by our business community. So I don't think that this is a real issue, even if there may be some trying to lower down the speed, even if there may be some taking the opportunity to fight against the decarbonization of the economy. But that's not broadly shared. That's not the way the economics, the facts show where we can find our competitiveness and the modernization of our industry. Not to forget that our main goal as European institutions, as governments, is to come along with our industrials to ensure that they are successful in this technology race that is already happening all over the world.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Yes, so I think Teresa actually explained it very well, but just maybe to add, ETS is the main engine of the decarbonization of Europe. And it has been a success. We have managed to reduce our emissions significantly whilst at the same time growing the sectors that are actually covered by ETS. So this has not been a competitive disadvantage. It's actually sparked a transition and a transformation that has secured the competitiveness of many industries. I will also say as a more general comment that, yes, we are in the middle of a crisis right now that does hit some citizens very hard, especially vulnerable groups in our societies. That does hit some parts of our industry very hard, especially the high-intensive energy parts of our production sectors. And yes, we do need to allow member states to use state aid to help. But since our long-term goal is to transition away from fossils, anything we do that might directly or indirectly subsidize fossils needs to be temporary and it needs to be very targeted. And we also recommend that it is not to stand alone, that is accompanied by other efforts to, for instance, electrify faster, to change fuels so that, for instance, if you have a company that is using gas broilers, you have subsidies to change to heat pumps, that we see more countries using the possibilities to support energy efficiency measures. All of these efforts that we know worked during the crisis in 22. Now we have even learned from some of the mistakes we made then and have learned from some of the very good examples that were there so that we can direct and coordinate with member states much better.
Thank you. And Nikolaus, please.
Thank you so much, Nicholas Kohlmeier, for your active. Commissioner Jørgensen, you have yourself said that the EU must enact demand-side measures. People should drive as little as possible or potentially even take fewer flights. My understanding is that today the Commission is pushing for none of this. Why have you backed down from addressing the demand side of this current oil shock? And the second question, if I may, would be your demand to the co-legislators to finalize negotiations on the grids package by the summer. Do you not fear that you are eliminating the European Parliament's ability to contribute to this legislative process in the service or to pursue a law that would at best come into effect 2028, 2029?
So on the demand side, we obviously still encourage member states to do whatever they can to bring down demand, both because it will help in the current price crisis that we're in, but also because it can help prevent a security of supply issue in the future. Which specific measures member states will then choose to use, we think it's best for member states to decide. I think what you may be referring to is that I said that indeed the IEA's different recommendations were good, and I do think that in general we can not only trust, we should also support the important work of Fatih Birol in the IEA, and I did so in this case. On the grids package, the biggest bottleneck, as I see it, potentially in the green transition in Europe, is that if we don't have the transmission. I mean, we do deploy every year record numbers of new renewables. The year before last, it was 78 gigawatts. Last year, we haven't got the numbers yet, but I expect it to be close to 90. This year, we'll probably break records again. This is all good, and this is one of the reasons why we're better situated at dealing with this crisis than we were in 22. But if this is to continue, and not only continue, but actually, if we actually want to speed up this process, we need to fundamentally also speed up the enlargement of our grids, the deployment of new grids, the flexibility of the ones we have. And this is why we put forward a grids package. The grids package will do fundamentally a number of things. One is it would slash the times that it takes to get permitting down fundamentally. It will introduce more EU collective planning, so that we avoid the situation that we have now where things are primarily coming bottom up, meaning that we don't have a common coordination of what is happening. It's like building a jigsaw puzzle without looking at the picture of the box. We want to change that. And other measures that will help facilitate cost sharing between member states. If we adapt these things and do it fast, then we can not only make the fast transition that we need more feasible, we can also help countries save money. Let me give you just one example. Germany loses 4 billion worth of value every year on curtailment. What does this mean? Well, it means, for instance, that in a country like the one that I know best, Denmark, we have wind turbines that sometimes, when the wind is blowing, are paid to stop production. Why? Because the transmission net in Germany are not well equipped to handle it. So we use public money in Denmark to subsidize wind turbines and creation of wind power, and the Germans use public money to pay for these turbines to be shut down when the grid is not available. This is, of course, not rational. This is in the interest of all countries in the Union to solve. And this is why we have also asked the Parliament and the Council to work as fast as they can, and we will, of course, facilitate these negotiations the best we can. And from the talks that I've had with rapporteurs in the Parliament, it seems like they are not only willing to do this, that they are very eager to do this, because they also see these challenges as very immediate, and they see the crisis that we're in as a factor that should lead to us turning up the pace here.
Thank you. David.
Thank you. David Carretta, Radio Radicale, Italian Radio. The first question is on the request by 5 member states to introduce windfall a tax on windfall profit. Why the Commission is not eager to accept this request? Is it a lesson from 2022? And since state aids are basically the answer in terms of helping vulnerable person or categories, I mean, what about the fragmentation of internal market? The fact that some member states do not have fiscal space to do it, and this tax could help. Second question is about Russian gas. Instead of accelerate the electrification in some countries, the one I know best, there are important voices asking to stop the phasing out of Russian gas. One example, a deputy prime minister, the chief of the business organization, the president of the biggest energy company, Eni. They are all asking to stop the phasing out and start buying again Russian gas. What's your answer to those calls? Thank you.
Yeah, Pete first, and then the Commissioner. Go ahead.
So, in my opinion, it would be a huge mistake to start importing Russian energy again. And the decision of the Commission is very, very clear. No. We will no longer import as much as one molecule of Russian energy in the future. Why? Because Putin weaponized energy against member states, because Putin used the energy to blackmail member states of the European Union, and finally, because if we buy his energy, we also help indirectly support the war against our friends in Ukraine. So it would be a terrible mistake, and we are not going to in any way change our plans. We have adopted the legislation, it's being implemented, and soon we will be out of a dependency that, frankly speaking, we should have gotten rid of many years ago.
And EVP, please.
Yes, because I love your two questions, because I think that your two questions allow me to stress the one related to Russian gas, echoing and deploying a little bit further, developing a little bit further the comments being made by the Commissioner Jørgensen on why it is so important for our democracies, for our freedoms, for avoiding subordinating positions, to develop and accelerate our energy package, why it relates to freedom, to capacity to decide, and to count on affordable ways to provide the energy that we need. So I think that there may be, for whatever situations, for whatever national circumstances, there may be member states where it is taking longer than expected to put in place some of the measures that we had already identified in the past. And today we learn once again, we experience once again, why we need to do it faster and better. And yes, of course, we have decided not to accept this type of blackmail anymore. But I think that the electrification, the efficient use of energy, the deployment of home-ground solutions is very effective also to boost other industrial and services-related sectors. So what we need to do is identify the best way to be performing and to be very effective, but not to accept these voices that, driven by very legitimate fears, to try to identify short-term shortcuts to cover what it would create, to cover problems that could create much higher problems at cost in the time to come. Then on the demand, the letter coming from 5 ministers asking for a common tax on windfall profits. I could make 3 comments. The first of them is very political, but I think it is important. It shows to what extent terrible circumstances as the ones that we lived in the past or the one that we live now should not be used in the benefit of a very few with no real increase in cost, but taking the opportunity to make more profits, impacting on the people, the affordability of basic goods for the people. And I think that this fairness concern is something that no government can escape when there is a problem. And this shows to what extent there may be member states willing to tackle this issue through taxation. The second comment is that, in fact, a common tax requires unanimity. It may be not easy to find unanimity because there may be different views on how to handle this, or it may be different views on how to technically develop something that should apply in the whole European continent. So what it may make sense, as we do in this communication, and we are very open to keep on doing and working, is to identify the soundest manner, so to provide alternatives for those member states that could be willing to take this measure, to be sure that it is as sound as it can be. But I think that this is already in the communication. We will work with member states willing to enter into this approach. But as I said, for the time being, what we cannot identify is the opportunity to take a common decision on how to implement a common tax all across the European Union.
Thank you. And we have several questions online. So I would ask Anna Matos to ask her question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Anna.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Ana Martinez of the Portuguese news agency Lusa. I would like to have more a political assessment on how worried, how concerned is the Commission about the coming months, also regarding the jet fuel and the fuel in general, also taking into account that we are approaching summer and some EU member states, such as Portugal, are quite dependent on tourism. That's my first question. And my second, if I may, when can we expect the state aid temporary framework? And as my colleague said, some countries do not have the same fiscal space. So if you could please elaborate on this framework. Thank you so much.
VP, would you like to start?
Oh. Maybe I start with the assessment. So we have to be quite clear and blunt in our way of describing which type of crisis it is that we're in now. This is not a short-term, small increase in prices. This is a crisis that is probably as serious as the 1973 and the 2022 crisis combined. And this means that we are looking into some very difficult months or maybe even years, depending, of course, on the development in the Middle East. But even in a best-case scenario, it's still bad. If we imagine that there's a peace tomorrow, it will still take, for instance, Qatar, probably 2 years, maybe even more, to rebuild their gas production and transportation infrastructure. So this means that the world market LNG prices will not stabilize or even fall as was expected in the next couple of years. For oil, it's a little bit different. Probably we expect the production capacity to be able to be increased quite fast again, even though infrastructure has also been ruined here. But it'll still be between 2 to 4 weeks, and then, of course, that's the time that it takes to sail the products to Europe. So even a best-case scenario is a pretty bad scenario for the next months to come, and we will have effects for years. Our worst-case scenario can look in many different ways, of course, depending on the development, but it's clear that then we are talking very far-reaching and widespread consequences for our economy as a whole. This is why we are extremely eager to try and set in place policies that not only help us target and address the present price crisis, but also prevent that we will have an actual security of supply crisis in the future. Last point, jet fuel. This is the area now that is under most pressure, and IEA has estimated that within 5 or 6 weeks we can have a real security of supply issue, and this is an evaluation that we have to take serious, and even though we're not there yet, we can indeed end up in a situation where this will cause a real problem to us. This is why we propose today, or rather we declare today, that we will make an observatory where we have all the data needed. Where is the capacity? Who owns it? How much do we import? How much do we export? Where is it possible to redistribute if we end up in a situation like this? Because we are very much aware that our economies depend, of course, on the ability for us to fly. A lot of people are going on holiday this summer. A lot of cities and regions and member states are dependent on tourism. And, of course, they are very worried.
EVP Rivera, please.
No, thank you so much. Let's take the best case scenario as described by Commissioner Jørgensen. The opening of the Hormuz Strait, the end of the war situation. It could mean the most effective economic measure. Yes, of course, we need to work for this scenario to happen. Even in that case, there could be impacts that will last. Even in that case, we are better prepared than in the past. And even if better prepared than in the past, there are groups of population, there are sectors that are more affected than others. The longer it lasts, the more cascading effects that we will be witnessing. But we want to prevent, to the extent possible, these cascading effects. This is why we have been working in this targeted, temporary state aid framework that could provide some additional flexibility in the instruments that have already been adopted, and that could come with some of the measures that were more effective in the previous crisis. What we are presenting, introducing today, is, I could say, proportionate according to the knowledge and the impacts that we have already identified, but it is very important to stay attentive to be sure and to identify how the situation and the responses evolve. It is very important to identify the measures that empower the member states to do more, and there is funding opportunities in the existing context, funding available in the Recovery and Resilience Facility, in the cohesion policy, or even in the national policies being tackled, being managed at the national level. It is important, as I said, to speed up as much as possible, according to this Accelerate EU investment chapter, the creation of opportunities, so crowding in private money, understanding that it makes good business case to invest in Europe in these conditions and in this reliable situation on where we want to go. And, of course, the final very important comment, political statement, is that both the national leaders, but also the European institutions, including the European Commission, share the common goal to be attentive and to keep on doing things if these additional measures could be needed.
Okay. And I'll take in the back there. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Matthijs Schiffers, Head Financieel Dagblad. I have a question for Commissioner Jørgensen. You recommend member states to do everything they can to reduce demand. Do you recommend the European Parliament not to travel to Strasbourg next week as well? Thank you.
No, I don't recommend that. That would have been a headline, I guess, if I did.
There you go. I'm sorry you don't have your headline. Christian.
Thanks, Paula. Christian Anna with Ants Europe. Commissioner Jørgensen, you mentioned that we need to act fast. So I'm somewhat surprised to see nuclear power mentioned in the communication, given that any investments in this is likely to be a decade or maybe more away from deployment. So I was wondering if you could clarify that. And related on the question that you said member states, it's up to member states to deal with any immediate measures to reduce demand for fossil fuels. I was wondering, I mean, that seems a bit, it's a bit difficult to understand given the gravity of the situation that you just outlined. So I was wondering, is it because of the, that this is politically divisive, or is it simply that the EU cannot do anything? Thank you.
So there's a very clear distinction between very short-term measures and long-term measures, in the sense that if we are to make legislation in the European Union, and if we are to, via our different procedures, find financing, that obviously takes time. So, for instance, one of the most important things that we propose is the expansion of the European grids. I spoke about this earlier. Now, we will also help finance this, so we've proposed in the next MFF to allocate 5 times more money than in this MFF, so just under 30 billion euros. This is very necessary, this is very good, but this is in the next MFF, and this is for grids to be built in the future. Does it make it less important because it's something that we need to do in the next 5, 10 or 15 years? Obviously not. The present situation reminds us how important it is to do it as fast as possible, and this is why we, in the communication, not only on nuclear but also on grids, also on deployment of more renewables, also on better energy efficiency, also recommend and push wherever we can the more long-term solutions. But we will also put forward new objectives and new tools, and that will happen especially on electrification. And before summer, we will present in the Commission an electrification strategy, and that will include a target for the European Union on electrification. So that's one example. On the demand reduction, so again, some of the things that you can do that would work tomorrow are indeed national competency and is indeed something that they could do if they wanted to right away. One example is lowering taxes on electricity. Some member states have done this, and we have also in the communication other examples of member states that have introduced in this crisis measures that will actually work also very short term. One of those examples is making public support schemes for changing gas broilers or oil broilers with heat pumps or district heating.
Anything to add? No? Then we are coming to the end of our time. Let's see if we can take still 1 or 2 questions, please.
Hi, thank you very much. Alexander Chituk from Reuters News. I had 2 questions. The first was, how will the Commission make sure that the state aid measures it wants to propose to ease pressure of high energy prices on sectors such as agriculture, fisheries, transport will be fiscally sustainable? And the second, it says in press materials that the Commission will assist member states in the design of targeted, timely, and temporary measures to address the crisis, including a temporary state aid framework to support the most exposed economic sectors. Do you think the measures already announced by many EU governments in the past weeks match its criteria of temporary and targeted? And how will you make sure that there is a level playing field between the governments that have more fiscal space and those who don't? Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for the question. We will come up with this temporary and targeted state aid framework in the coming days. As I said, I think that the thing that was, or one of the things that was most important when working in this framework is that we had the experience. It's not, unluckily we had the experience, and I think that this helps to identify which are the sectors that need it the most, how we can do things that can be fast, effective, and temporary, as you say. And we also try to have the views, to count on the views of the different member states. This is important. There could be member states thinking that there are additional needs or that measures should be designed differently. So we have been in quite a close contact with member states to ensure that what we present as the common framework can work in all member states. And I think that this is key, because you are pointing out on something which is relevant too. We don't want market fragmentation. We don't want to break the internal market. On the contrary, we think that coming up with a set of possibilities that allow member states to do things, reducing to the minimum possible extent the risk of introducing a level playing field among the different players is key, and that is part of the reasoning behind coming up with this temporary framework. Introducing some additional flexibility for a very short period in some of the measures being adopted under the 4.5 of the Clean Industrial Estate framework may be helping in more structural changes that could be a little bit more challenging in the current context, but I think that this is key. The additional related comment is, what about the fiscal space? What about the eventual funding from different sources? That is not part of the discussion for the time being. I think that, as you know, what we try to respect and to be quite disciplined on that is the existing framework. What it may come later on, we don't know. But for the time being, this is what we've got. The fiscal space, the fiscal rules, and the existing funding that is already available. And we are doing it, I would say, making a proposal that can be very effective with the existing tools. But as I said, we all need to be quite attentive on how things evolve and to what extent the response or the needs may change in the coming months.
And we conclude with the last question here, please.
Thank you very much. Ian Johnston from the Financial Times. Just two quick ones. One that seems not quite answered previously. Is there a recognition with this package that windfall taxes and price caps on gas didn't work last time in the last crisis? And on jet fuels, how quickly can you put in place these measures? Because, as Fatih Birol has warned, we will face shortages in Europe within 6 weeks. Will we be able to stave those off, or are we looking at cancelled flights?
So the first question was asked and answered already. Indeed, anything you'd like to add?
On the first question, I could say no. There is no recognition that it didn't work. On the contrary, I think that the fact that we count on this letter shows that for certain ministers, for certain member states, this is something that deserves attention yet. And speaking about the situation, I know the best, not because of my current capacity, but because of my previous capacity. I could say that we took measures that were quite effective in order to protect consumers. For instance, introducing a tax on the additional raise of prices when power companies felt like breaking existing contracts and paying the penalty and offering a new contract doubling or tripling the price. And we said, okay, if you do so, there could be a tax on that. And what had happened is that the incomes did not come up from the tax perspective, but the contracts were not broken. So I think that, no, there may be different options thinking about this, and there could be different appetite and interest coming from the member states. And what it is our duty as Commission is to come along with those member states identifying things that are not part of the common menu to be as effective, as fair, as sound as possible. And that's what we intend to reflect in this in this communication.
Would you like to add, Commissioner?
No, just on the jet fuels. So the work is ongoing. We've already started. Whether or not we will manage to prevent or limit a security of supply crisis depends on the duration of the crisis. We do everything we can to make sure that we will coordinate better in the future, have new tools to have the overview of refining capacity and stock in our different member states. But obviously, we also have to be quite honest and say that whether or not we will be in a security of supply crisis is primarily a result of what goes on in the Middle East. What we can do is to try and prevent and limit.
Good. Thank you very much to both. Thank you for your very diverse questions, and our interpreters, I wish you a good afternoon.